Before we get into today's video, I just want to give you guys a huge thank you for helping me hit 100 subscribers on YouTube. I know it's not much in most people's eyes, but it's a ton to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you for clicking that subscribe button and coming to my channel to enjoy my videos. It genuinely does mean the world to me, and I'm so thankful for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Call of Duty World at War and how it portrays history and does it right in a way where it doesn't necessarily take away from how brutal World War II really was. I hope you guys enjoy this video. There is going to be a little bit of a warning here, so if you do want to skip that, skip to this time up on screen. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you so much for watching and have yourselves a fantastic day. Bye-bye. Warning: the content of this video discusses and showcases scenes from Call of Duty World at War, a video game that depicts the brutal realities and horrors of war. The game contains graphic violence and distressing imagery that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is intended for educational and informational purposes only, aiming to provide insight into how the game portrays the historical events and the severe impacts of war. The views expressed in this video are those of the creator and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of the game developers, publishers, or any affiliated organizations. Please note that while Call of Duty World at War is a work of fiction, it is inspired by real historical events. The game's portrayal of these events can be intense and may be upsetting for some viewers. We encourage viewers to approach the subject matter with sensitivity and respect for those affected by the real-life events depicted in the game. Thank you for watching and supporting our channel, and I hope you enjoy the video. Hey guys, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to be discussing Call of Duty World at War. I'm going to be discussing 4 separate points about the game. The first point we're going to be discussing today is how the game stacks up against other Call of Duty titles that have come out since its release. The second point we're going to be discussing today is how it actually does war correct and how it maintains the brutal aspect of war's reality without disconnecting the player from the different historical events. The third thing we're going to be discussing today is how this game gave rise, accidentally might I add, to one of the most successful indie modes, which is Call of Duty Zombies. We're going to be talking about how it gave birth to that completely accidentally and how it created an absolutely incredible community and atmosphere. And then the final point we're going to be discussing today is why we don't see Call of Duties that are as emotionally charged as Call of Duty World at War. We're going to jump straight into my first point, but like I said guys, if you do enjoy the video, feel free to go down below, drop a like, subscribe, a comment on how you thought the video was, because I read each and every one of those comments, and I really do take them to heart. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get into my first point. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say at this point, most of us have played Call of Duty at some time, and it's interesting to see how the series has evolved over the years, but unfortunately many fans, including myself, feel that the modern Call of Duty titles are taking a turn for the worse compared to their predecessors. In the earlier Call of Duty games, especially those set during World War II, there was a focus on portraying the complexity and moral ambiguity of war. Take Call of Duty 2 and Call of Duty World at War for example. These games didn't shy away from showing that there were no clear-cut good guys or bad guys. They highlighted the brutal realities faced by soldiers on all sides. Call of Duty World at War is a prime example. The game portrays the Pacific and Eastern fronts, where you experience the harshness of war from both American and Soviet perspectives. The Soviets' ruthless push into Germany fueled by a desire for vengeance, and the Americans' grueling island-hopping campaign against a tenacious Japanese enemy. Both depicted the grim reality of warfare. The game didn't gloss over war crimes or the psychological toll on soldiers, instead presenting a more nuanced view of the conflict. In contrast, modern Call of Duty titles, particularly those in the Modern Warfare and Black Ops series, often present more black and white scenarios. Villains like Makarov in Modern Warfare are depicted with clear evil motives, making it easy to identify the bad guys. The narrative structure in these games tends to be more straightforward, with a clear division between heroes and villains, reflecting a shift towards more cinematic storytelling and action-oriented gameplay. This oversimplification results in a lack of depth and realism that made older titles so compelling. Another issue with modern titles is the emphasis on fast-paced action and spectacle over substance. The advancements in technology allow for stunning graphics, motion capture, and realistic sound design, creating highly immersive experiences. However, this focus on visual fidelity and cinematic experiences often comes at the expense of deeper, more reflective storytelling. Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the 2019 version, offers photorealistic visuals and intense combat scenarios, but these elements sometimes overshadow the narrative, making the story feel secondary to the action. Moreover, the introduction of new game modes like Battle Royale in Call of Duty Warzone and the continued emphasis on multiplayer modes have shifted the focus further towards competitive and cooperative gameplay. These modes prioritize fast-paced action and skill-based mechanics over narrative depth, catering to a broader audience seeking diverse gaming experiences. However, this shift has diluted the single-player campaign experience, which used to be a cornerstone of the series. Another significant change is the approach to historical and political context. Older titles often grounded their stories in specific historical events, providing players with a sense of authenticity and educational value. For example, Call of Duty World at War incorporated actual World War II footage and historical details, giving players insight into the real-world implications of the battles they were fighting. Modern titles, however, tend to adopt fictional or loosely based geopolitical scenarios, allowing for more creative freedom, but often sacrificing the educational aspect and historical accuracy. This shift enables developers to craft more elaborate and unpredictable storylines, but it can result in less emphasis on moral complexity and realism. I think everyone has their own take on Call of Duty and how it's begun using different strategies to make more money from its games. But around the community, there's a very common and growing concern about those monetization strategies because of the introduction of things like microtransactions, loot boxes, and season passes, which have all led to accusations of the series prioritizing profit over player experience. This approach can feel pretty exploitative and has left many longtime fans disillusioned with the franchise. So I think that when we really take a look at it, modern Call of Duty games do offer stunning visuals, and they usually have pretty good multiplayer experiences and a lot of action, but they tend to fall short in terms of narrative depth, historical accuracy, or moral complexity. And the older titles provided a more nuanced and grounded portrayal of war, which many fans feel is missing from the current iterations. The evolution of Call of Duty reflects broader trends in the gaming industry, balancing the demand for realism and depth with the desire for innovation and broader appeal. However, in striving for that mass market success, the series seems to have lost some of the qualities that made it truly great. So that brings me to my second point. Now we're going to be talking about how the older COD titles, specifically World at War, does a really good job portraying horrors of war and things that occur in war that most people aren't exactly knowledgeable on, and how those newer games tend to just ignore them. So the second point, we're just going to be going into the portrayal of war in gaming in general, but we're going to be focusing on World at War. I think it's probably safe to say that at one point or another in our lives, most of us have enjoyed a Call of Duty title, whether it's Infinite Warfare, World at War, the Modern Warfare series, or any other installment in the COD franchise. But let's face it, today's Call of Duty games are a far cry from the ones we played before 2008. Modern Call of Duty titles are all about action, with points popping up for every kill, and campaigns that often don't really have a whole lot of depth to them, focusing instead on heroic stories that aren't necessarily realistic. But Call of Duty World at War, which came out in 2008, still holds up today for its raw portrayal of the brutal realities of war. Sure, some parts feel dated, but its main goal, to show the true horrors of World War II, it absolutely nailed. Compare that to some modern titles like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, the 2023 version, not the one from like 2015 or whatever, which focuses more on multiplayer than a gripping campaign. The 2023 Modern Warfare 3 campaign was one of the worst in the franchise in my opinion, showing how far the series has drifted from compelling storytelling to just being about multiplayer and Warzone at the end of the day. Don't get me wrong, I understand that back in 2008 when World at War did come out, Call of Duty in general was still trying to figure out its identity, but World at War launched with a fun multiplayer mode, but its campaign was the real highlight. It gave us a deep, historically grounded experience that didn't shy away from showing the grim reality of World War II. In the Pacific campaign, you experienced the brutal combat between American forces and Japanese soldiers. The game shows tactics like island hopping and the use of flamethrowers, vividly portraying the war's harshness. For example, using a flamethrower reveals the horrifying effects on both the environment and enemy soldiers. On the Eastern Front, the game portrays the devastating impact of the German invasion on Soviet territory and the ruthless Soviet counteroffensive. It accurately depicts Soviet war crimes such as executing surrendering German soldiers, and in particular, the mission Vendetta, where you target General Amsel, begins with German soldiers executing wounded Soviet comrades, underscoring the pervasive cruelty of the conflict.
Are you ready?
Töten Sie mich nicht!
He wants mercy. You do not deserve mercy.
What mercy did you show to our people?
Die.
Wait! He may help.
Help us. He can die for us. Muda!
World at War also tends to delve into the psychological toll of war, because in a lot of situations, Soviet soldiers face a terrible choice between supporting Stalin or Hitler. And trust me, to be nearly as bad as Hitler, Stalin must have been horrible. But that definitely highlights the moral complexity of the era and shows that it's not so cut and dry. The game shows Soviet commissars urging soldiers to sacrifice their lives for the motherland, which kind of reflects the disregard for individual human life in pursuit of their broader strategic goals. Scenes where soldiers charge fortified positions resulting in massive casualties help to emphasize this point. The game's attention to detail in depicting the gore and brutality of combat adds to its realism. Unlike many modern shooters, World at War includes scenes where wounded enemies enter a last stand type of mode, and just seeing that is definitely heartbreaking. Because you kind of get to see as they attempt to take you down with their final breaths, and I feel like that tiny detail really emphasizes the desperation and determination of a lot of the soldiers on both sides of the conflict. The American campaign's a little bit different, but it also helps to portray the psychological impact of the war on soldiers. The depiction of fake surrenders by Japanese troops leading to the death of American soldiers adds another layer of complexity that I don't think a lot of people realized.
Hold your fire.
Stop! They're closing in.
Polanski, search him.
On the ground now!
Keep those hands up.
Shit!
Miller! Roebuck! Miller! They killed the Sarge!
This grim reality made American soldiers very, very wary of taking prisoners, contributing to the cycle of violence and mistrust. Pretty much every Call of Duty game has some form of cutscene that loosely relates to real military footage, but in Call of Duty World at War, I think where the shock value is really portrayed is that the game's historical footage is interwoven with its narrative, and that enhances its authenticity. Call of Duty World at War doesn't sugarcoat the brutality of the Second World War at all, and many times it shows real footage of the war's devastation, and the game actually ends with the sobering statistic that 60 million people lost their lives in the conflict, which is definitely a lot different than a lot of Call of Duty games, where at the end of it you feel a sense of congratulations or like you've done something incredible, but this game kind of just gives you a moment to take it all in and really understand what you just witnessed was something that really did happen. And I think it just helps to really contribute to the authentic feel that World at War strives to achieve. When World at War was released in November 2008, it was met with excitement and quickly sold over 11 million copies by June of 2009. This enthusiasm reflected a genuine interest in the immersive and historically grounded gaming experience that World at War gave to players. Today's Call of Duty titles, however, seem to have lost this focus. The excitement for new releases has definitely waned. I mean, it doesn't take more than a Google search about the newest COD to really show you that. And maybe that's due to the repetitive and the formulaic nature of the recent games, or maybe it's just due to people not being as interested in Call of Duty anymore. But the decline in enthusiasm is evident in the sales figures. Like the latest Modern Warfare 3 saw a 25% drop in sales compared to the previous year, with Activision withholding specific sales numbers either to hide how bad it really is, or in general just due to poor performance. But this trend does suggest that the community is growing tired of the recycled content that we seem to just keep getting in these newer titles. So I feel in general that modern Call of Duty games obviously prioritize their multiplayers over a compelling single-player experience. The campaigns and zombie modes in the newest COD feel like afterthoughts, and they kind of lack that excitement and depth that a lot of these previous titles had. Whereas World at War felt like a complete package, with each part of the game. The campaign, the multiplayer, and the zombies all felt like their own standalone titles that really came together to create such a great game, and it felt like each part of the game was crafted with care and dedication. World at War stands out for its unflinching portrayal of the horrors of war, and by presenting the brutal realities faced by the soldiers on both sides, it also helps to highlight the moral complexities and atrocities that were actually committed in history. The game offers a more realistic and impactful depiction of war than pretty much any other title in the franchise. This depth and authenticity makes it a powerful reminder of the true nature of conflict, setting it apart from the more black and white narratives often seen in these modern Call of Duty titles. To really cap off my point, I'm just going to kind of repeat that, modern Call of Duty games, they just focus on their multiplayer and flashy action, but World at War remains a testament to the franchise's actual potential to deliver profound and historically grounded experiences. It's a reminder of the horrors of war and a call for a return to more meaningful storytelling in gaming. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that necessarily think that World at War has one of the best campaigns, but personally I think it is the absolute underdog in this situation, and it has one of the best campaigns in gaming, and it easily has the best campaign in all of the Call of Duty franchise. Keep in mind that's just my opinion, and if you guys do disagree, that's okay too. I bet a vast majority of people listening to this video right now have played Call of Duty Zombies at one point or another, but did you know that the mode wasn't actually supposed to be in the game? Call of Duty World at War was following the massive success of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and prior to World at War, Treyarch was widely considered the lesser studio. Especially since their first Call of Duty title, which was Call of Duty 3, didn't do as well as they had hoped, and it's often regarded as one of the weakest entries in the franchise. The story behind the creation of Call of Duty Zombies is sometimes disputed, but according to Games Radar, the studio was clearly nervous about the beast it had created. How did it all come about? Well, it all started with a German soldier who was on fire. Yeah, that's right. It started with a German soldier in the game that was on fire. Essentially, World at War had a very strained development process with a lot of passionate, talented people working hard to meet tight deadlines. A few scripters began playing with the on-fire animations introduced with the flamethrower in World at War, and this animation, reminiscent of 80s movie scenes where people are on fire, stumble, and fall, actually became the basis for the zombie movements. If you look back at World at War, you'll notice that enemies hit with the flamethrower flail their arms like shambling zombies from a Romero movie. This sparked the creativity of the entire team, and soon everyone at Treyarch was contributing to this side project during their spare time. This really highlights that the studio was hoping for an essential Hail Mary to set their game apart from Modern Warfare. They needed something unique to draw players to Treyarch titles, and it wasn't going to happen in multiplayer or the campaign alone. Despite various developmental struggles, the finished product became one of the most beloved titles in the Call of Duty franchise. Call of Duty Zombies today has given rise to a massive community that loves its content. To quote the article again, this was a secret game, a mini mode, an Easter egg, whatever you want to call it, crafted from the passion and creativity of a team with little free time. And yet, they believed in it utterly. So much so, in fact, that Treyarch decided to present it to Activision to see if they could include it in the game. Consider how bold a move that was. During the late 2000s, Activision had a reputation for being a commerce-driven publisher, and it was really focused on mega franchises that were delivered on a set schedule. And Call of Duty was the crown jewel of these franchises, especially after Modern Warfare. Introducing a seemingly frivolous zombie minigame into a multi-million-dollar franchise was a very careful decision. Treyarch could never have foreseen the love this mode would receive and what it would eventually grow into. The first Call of Duty Zombies map was Nacht der Untoten, which means Night of the Undead in German. Many people believed it was directly inspired by George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And this is pretty evident because in later titles such as Call of the Dead and Black Ops, we actually find Romero himself appearing as a character. Crazy enough, some of the beloved Zombies maps that we have today almost never happened. During the development of DLC 4 for World at War, which included Der Riese, Treyarch actually ran out of resources. But this halt ended up allowing them to focus on creating new Zombies maps for the upcoming Call of Duty Black Ops. Maps like Call of the Dead and Kino der Toten were originally meant to be DLC for World at War, but were repurposed for future games. It wasn't until the release of Origins that Call of Duty Zombies had a concrete storyline, and prior to that, the team worked hard to create the game and storyline that fans love, and that culminated in the more recent Black Ops titles. This shows that miracles can be found in the unlikeliest places. Even within Treyarch, not everyone believed in the success of Call of Duty Zombies, but it became a staple of the franchise. And many players buy Treyarch titles specifically for the Zombies mode, and a lot of them end up ignoring the Infinity Ward titles entirely. Now, Call of Duty Zombies has its own standalone community with its own values and principles, and it's amazing to see how a side project that began as a niche mode evolved into a beloved phenomenon. To really cap off this part of the video, I'm going to give you guys some fun facts that you might not know about Call of Duty Zombies. Number 1. The initial Zombies mode was developed in secret by a few passionate developers who worked on it during their spare time. It wasn't an officially sanctioned project until it gained significant traction within the team. The second fact is Noctur on Toten. The first Zombies map, Noctur on Toten, was created as an Easter egg and wasn't initially intended to be a major game mode. It was inspired by the survival horror genre and George A. Romero's zombie films. Famous voice actors have contributed to the Zombies mode, including Fred Tatasciore as the voice of Nikolai Belinsky and Tom Kane as the voice of Takeo Masaki. Their performances have added depth and personality to the characters. Call of Duty Zombies has featured several celebrity appearances. In Call of the Dead, players can see and play as characters voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, Robert Englund, who's also Freddy Krueger if you guys didn't know that, Michael Rooker, and Danny Trejo, with George A. Romero himself appearing as a special enemy. The Zombies maps are filled with hidden messages, Easter eggs, and complex storylines, and players have spent countless hours deciphering these secrets, adding to the mode's intrigue and replayability. Now we're going to be talking about two more fun facts that are a little bit different. Number 6 is going to be the fan theories. The rich lore and mysterious elements of Zombies have given rise to numerous fan theories and speculations. The community is highly engaged, constantly seeking new clues and unraveling the narrative. Zombies mode has also crossed over with various pop culture elements, including the addition of the iconic ray gun, which has become a staple of the mode. The ray gun was inspired by classic sci-fi movies and has appeared in nearly every Zombies map. These fun facts highlight the creativity and passion that went into developing Call of Duty Zombies, making it one of the most unique and beloved modes in the franchise's history. That's going to wrap it up for my third point. The fourth thing we're going to be talking about today is just, why is Call of Duty so shallow nowadays? What I mean by that is, why does Call of Duty lack a lot of the character development and other things that older Call of Duty titles used to have? In a lot of the games nowadays, I can't even really tell you most of the characters' names. For example, Black Ops 3 was probably one of the least memorable campaigns, in all of gaming. The only person I remember is Taylor, and that's because I saw him on a TikTok video like a week ago. But we're going to be talking about why World at War itself and the games of today in the Call of Duty franchise are just so different, and why each one of them kind of has its own way to develop character personalities, and why I think the older titles did it better. I have 6 main points that I think explain this pretty well, and those 6 points are the shift in focus to multiplayer and monetization, the annual release cycle, the broad appeal strategy, the lack of risk-taking, the evolution of the gaming industry as a whole, and then finally the nostalgia factor. But let me explain. Like I've said a few times throughout this video, a lot of the modern Call of Duty games are focused more on the multiplayer and how they can make more money off of the game than just selling it itself. One of the biggest changes is the overall shift in focus from single-player campaigns to the multiplayer mode. And those modern titles tend to prioritize that multiplayer and battle royale experience, which are definitely more lucrative due to the microtransactions and seasonal content they're able to sell. And while multiplayer is undeniably fun, it just doesn't really have the narrative that a lot of people are looking for in these story games, or in the campaign of games in general. There's not really any emotional storytelling in a multiplayer, and to be honest with you, it's essentially just run, shoot, die, repeat. And there's nothing wrong with the direction that Call of Duty has taken. I understand that in the business world, it obviously makes more sense to go with what makes more money for your company, but it still just sucks to see that they've kind of just left all of the campaign modes out to dry. Because I'd love to see a new Call of Duty title that just simply has a good campaign, a good multiplayer, and then a good zombies mode. I don't know why that's so hard to find, but it's pretty much unseen nowadays. This brings me to my second point. which is Call of Duty's annual release cycle. I think it's pretty easy to see how that could lead to a lot of games being rushed and not being as polished as a lot of the developers want them to be.
Oh, look, it's a picture I took of you the first time I ever came here. Ah, look at you, so young and happy. Where do the years go?
The annual release cycle has put a ton of pressure on these developers to churn out these new titles quickly, and that rush often results in less time for crafting those intricate stories that we like to see in gaming. And it's more focus on ensuring the game is, quote unquote, market ready. But the rapid development pace leaves very little room for those thoughtful, detailed narratives that defined earlier games, which is why in a lot of these modern titles you don't see so many Easter eggs or little secrets the team just puts in there, because at the end of the day, they're pretty much just running out of time when they do release these games. And Activision in general just doesn't give them enough time to really put all the love and dedication into these titles that I think a lot of the developers want to use. And it just makes it very difficult to understand why they would do something like that, other than, again, just having that monetization there and being able to capitalize on Christmas and certain holidays in which they obviously get a lot of the younger audience buying these games. My third point we're going to be talking about is Call of Duty's broad appeal strategy, and this is pretty much the idea that they don't delve too deep into any one genre so that they can rake in players from all these different areas and different genres with different interests. And modern Call of Duty games they aim to appeal to a broader audience, and this means simplifying gameplay and story elements to being more accessible and significantly less emotionally loaded. And that's why in a lot of these titles, you don't really see them using any historical events that might be a little bit distressing to people, because they're just trying to make the game fun and, where you don't have to use a whole lot of your brain to really understand what's going on. And I'm not sure if that's really an Activision issue or a customer issue. I'm not sure, but it's totally up to you which game you do want to buy. And it's totally okay if you enjoy games that really aren't emotionally charged. Not everyone out there is looking for a title that has you on the verge of tears by the end of the game. You know what I mean? But there's also that group of people that really do play games to enjoy its story and really try and relate to these characters. Maybe not so much in World at War, hopefully, but just there's people out there that do really enjoy these in-depth storytelling games, and that's why things like The Last of Us have popped up and some other titles that just have stories that are incredible. And I understand that that's not where the money is for Call of Duty, so it makes sense that they're not focusing on the campaign as much. But still, just as the average gamer, it would be nice to see a good campaign mode just once in a while. I'm not even asking for every COD game to have an incredible campaign. Just like 1 out of 5, man. One every 10 years, something. I think a lot of us just want something to work with in the story mode department. The fourth point we're going to be discussing is definitely not just an Activision issue. I think this is an issue with a lot of gaming studios and just a lot of things in general. But there's this overall lack of risk taking in these modern titles, and you just have to think about it. If Treyarch never took a risk with the Call of Duty Zombies mode, we would never have had that. But now a lot of these Call of Duty games try and play it very safe, which, that's okay. It works for them. It makes them money. But it doesn't make any title more memorable than something we've played before in the franchise. It just kind of leads to a whole lot of nothing burgers with these games, where it's like, yeah, I remember playing Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. It was the same as Modern Warfare 1 Remastered, but not as good as Modern Warfare 3 Remastered, where, you can draw the direct line to each game's comparisons. And I understand that they're in the same trilogy, but when the games recycle the same guns and the same maps, it just becomes so repetitive. I wish that these Call of Duty studios would just take a page out of Treyarch's book and try something different. Maybe it doesn't work, but at the end of the day, it's not going to impact your sales the way you think it will. I think Call of Duty Vanguard, even though the zombies mode was absolutely terrible, I still respect that they tried something different with it. Did it work? No, but now they know that. They're not going to make that same mistake again. But you know, they can always try something different. Call of Duty Vanguard still did fine in sales. It still made them a ton of money. It just doesn't have a good zombies mode. It's gonna be remembered, just not for the right reasons. And I think Activision needs to understand that taking risks sometimes will have backlash, but more than you might think, it might also create a new type of gamer or a new type of fan for your franchise, and I think they've really lost sight of that. I think my fifth point is going to be about just the evolution of the gaming industry in general. And again, this isn't directed towards Activision or any one company specifically. It's just you have to understand that as time goes on, things do change. And the gaming industry, like everything else, has evolved. It's had a significant shift towards these live service models and constant content updates, and that does keep the game relatively fresh and engaging. It also shifts the focus from a cohesive, emotionally engaging story to a continuous stream of new content and events. So it's essentially just like when you see an advertisement and they keep throwing ads up that are very short but kind of get the point across. It's just enough to keep you playing the game, but not enough for you to really love that game. And I think there's definitely a nice in-between that these companies could find where they could release these live service updates and constant content updates. But the way that it's being done in modern gaming is usually a title releases unfinished, and then they release things that should have been released with the base game as constant content updates. So essentially when the game's 6 months into its lifetime, now it's kind of finished or getting closer to that. But I think if the game released in a finished state and then they added these things on just to help it kind of make it to next year's Call of Duty or, you know, next year's release, whatever they're planning, I think it would really help the community to enjoy these games and start relating to them again. And that brings me to my last point. So I think it's safe to say each and every one of us that have played Call of Duty World at War during our childhood do have at least a little bit of nostalgia towards the game. I mean, we can't ignore the nostalgia factor. The older games came out at a time when many of us were younger, and those intense emotional moments did leave a lasting impression. And our memories of these games are tied to personal experiences, which makes them seem more profound in hindsight. And I understand that a lot of games that we go back and play aren't as good, but I do think that World at War is just as good now, if not better, as how I remember it. That might not be true for every Call of Duty, because I have gone back and I've played Call of Duty Classic and Call of Duty 2, and those games don't really hold together all that well. But I think that what Activision needs to do is create games that we want to remember. So 10 years from now, all the people playing Modern Warfare 3 or whatever remember those titles, you know? And they think back to how much fun they had on it. Not, oh yeah, I bought a bunch of skins on that game and now my mom's broke, but that's okay. And I just think that nostalgia is something that's earned by titles, and it's definitely not just there. Like, Call of Duty World at War didn't just become an afterthought or anything like that. It was a game I genuinely enjoyed, and it led to so many great things in the Call of Duty franchise, which I think a lot of these modern titles are missing. That's going to bring us to the end of this video, and if you guys are still watching after almost 40 minutes of me yapping, I do genuinely appreciate it. I appreciate it more than you could ever know. I hope you guys do take away from this video that I do still enjoy Call of Duty, but I don't enjoy it as much as I do the older titles. And I also want to know, what do you think? Do you agree that modern Call of Duty games are more shallow? Or do you enjoy the new direction that these games are going in? I want you to let me know down in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this 40-minute, 50-minute, however long it ends up being after editing, production. And yeah, It's been Payne, guys. Thank you so much for watching and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.